Recording in progress, another episode of the Square and Compass podcast. I am back virtually visiting, well, I guess, so San Gabriel, is that part of Los Angeles or is that a separate?
Yes, San Gabriel is a city in Los Angeles County. So it's part of the county, it's not part of the city, but it's like a stone's throw away from downtown LA and LA City.
Very cool. Because I had the pleasure of visiting Los Angeles, and surrounding areas, Burbank, Santa Monica, Venice, a little while ago, and it was very, very cool visiting it. And so I'm glad I get to be back virtually at the very least to talk about Blossom Market Hall and its interesting connection to Freemasonry. But first, why don't you tell us a bit about the market? And it's just recently opened. So what's it been like, starting Blossom Market Hall?
Yeah, so going back in history, we've been working on this. We had worked on it for 3.5 years before we grand opened. And it's our first project ever. My husband did something completely different. He was in science before, and I did other things. But we moved back to our hometown. We grew up in the San Gabriel Valley area, and we just really wanted to bring a food hall and a public gathering place to our hometown. So it's been a passion project for us. So we set out to look for the perfect building for it. We looked in Pasadena, too expensive. We looked in Alhambra, nothing was the right fit. But thankfully, a couple of months later, we stumbled across this building. Our agent found it for us, and it wasn't even listed as a traditional, like just typical commercial real estate. It was listed as a specialty building. So we went to look at it. It's set in this historic neighborhood in San Gabriel, which actually, not everyone knows this, but has the oldest building in Los Angeles in it. The Fourth California Mission from 1771 is just like 800 feet from our building. And when we saw the Masonic Lodge, we just knew right away it was the perfect building for what we wanted to do. And so it was just the way we knew it. Well, first of all, it had ample parking around it, but it was already a gathering place for people because they had been having their meetings there. They rented it out for weddings, quinceañeras, things like that. So it was already kind of a place that people gather. It could already handle large groups of people, so that's kind of how we knew. And the location was fantastic, but being surrounded by all the history. There's also a 1927 playhouse that's next door. So, and the city wanted to revitalize that whole district. So it was perfect. So then we started work on it. We brought a 13 vendor gourmet food hall, which consists of a diverse lineup of different cuisines ranging from Caribbean to plant-based burgers to Southern barbecue, boba. And we also wanted to make sure we incorporated a lot of community space. So the food hall itself, I would say, comprises like 9,000 square feet. And there's an upstairs that's like 2,000 square feet. So the whole thing together is 11,000 square feet. But 2,000 of it is what we call community space. So it has a Wi-Fi lounge where people can come and work and use the free Wi-Fi. And we have a meeting room where we use the walls as an art gallery to exhibit work of local artists. And the meeting room can be used for people to have meetings. And we offered use of it for free to nonprofits. So we've already had some nonprofits have some meetings there. And so that's kind of the whole project. It's at its size, it's kind of more of like a community food hall, it's on the smaller side for a food hall, but it packs a lot of punch for its size because we are able to fit 13 vendors in there, which is surprising to a lot of people. And also just the region that it's in, it's a very centrally located place, and just the whole area kind of has a lot to offer, and so it's kind of become a regional food hall. We have people coming from as far as like Burbank and Orange County to visit. So
at the time when you discovered the Masonic Temple, the building, was it still being used as a Masonic temple? Were there still meetings around in there? Or
Yes, yeah. So at the time that they had listed it for sale, they were still using it for their meetings. I I think I even seen it once, like passing by when they had their meetings going on. But I don't know a whole lot because, it's private information to them. But just from what I kind of could get from the real estate agents was, they wanted to raise funds and that's why they wanted to sell it. And they had been renting it out for weddings and stuff. And I guess things were a little slow at that point for them in that. And I guess they thought the best thing to do was to sell it. And I think since then they've been sharing the facility with the Alhambra Masons. And so, yeah, so then they sold it to us. And actually, a month before we came along, the city of San Gabriel had kind of the council had explored the idea of purchasing this building. And I think like they weren't able to come up with the money or the offer that would have met what they needed to, what the building was worth, for the Masons to sell it. So that worked out because then we came along a month later and wanted to bring this food hall. And thankfully, when we approached the city about it, they were excited. So they were on board with what we were trying to do.
and what was the process like? You talked a little bit about it at the start, but just the process of converting a Masonic, or this Masonic temple in particular, converting it into a food hall. I mean, did you also try to maintain, especially on, say, the exterior, some of the Masonic touches in the facade? Just what was the process like of converting a Masonic temple into, in this case, the Blossom Market Hall?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things early on that we always wanted a building that had character and history. So that this particular building was not actually designated historic, even though like the neighborhood around it is kind of a historic zone. And we wanted that character because we wanted people to not just walk into a box, but experience some sense of history. And especially in this district with all this history around it. And also we knew it was important to the community that we retain the building the way it is. And so there was, from what I heard and reading just like old newspapers or something, there were other projects, not particularly for this building, but like, across the street or in that district where they tried to bring something and it was not going to respect the integrity of the neighborhood and the history of the neighborhood. And there was like an outcry and hundreds of people actually came out to protest. And there's actually a historic association in San Gabriel. They have their own historic association. And they came out and they were against the project, And so I knew how important history was to the community. And it was a goal that aligned with ours because that's kind of why we wanted a building that was like this, something we could bring an adaptive reuse project to. So we always, we conveyed that. I think initially there was some suspicion because they're so used to, other kinds of developers who didn't have that kind of sentiment, so there was some suspicion, but we held a town hall where we answered questions to the public. We actually had a number of people come out and we told them we love this building. We want to retain it. We're really just kind of restoring the outside more or less with a few changes. And inside, of course, we have to like change a lot of it, but where we can keep character defining features, we'd love to. And, they were really happy about it. Like the town hall ended on a really positive note. And then after that, we set out to fulfill our promise, because I know some people are still thinking, maybe they're just saying that, but what we were saying was true. So we actually even brought in a historic expert who, it wasn't anything super formal where they typed up like 100-page report or anything, but he had a background in that and he came and casually pointed out things to us, and we like recorded and took notes on our end. We conveyed that to the architects. So we tried to retain things. So if you come to the building, you'll see, you could still see the CMU blocks, we painted the outside, kind of went with the outside's more like a black and white palette. kind of accentuating the lines of the building and just wanting to blend in. We didn't want anything all wild and crazy in this historic district. And then we have our signage up, which we had to follow. The Mission District actually has its own like specific plan for the neighborhood. So we had to comply with that. So it limits like the percentage of signage we could have and kind of the look of it too. So we had that. But I mean, what we wanted to do, like it came out looking great and the building stands out. And I think it blends in with everything nicely while still having its own feel. And another thing is that we lit up the outside of the building. So historic buildings to me, when they're beautiful, they should be lit at night. In the neighborhood, I noticed that the historic buildings there are not really lit up. I mean, I think the Playhouse a little bit, but I think like, more could be done, like maybe with the Mission or something, I mean, there's probably a myriad of reasons why that hasn't been done yet. So I don't know, but I mean, just from a kind of aesthetic and historic perspective, it'd be nice to have it lit at night. And so we lit ours at night so people could really see the building at night as well. And then on the inside, and I want to say like ADA was a challenge. We wanted to keep the front the way it looked, and I felt like it was important we also met with Senya Lubicic, who's actually on the Historic Commission of San Gabriel, and her husband, and they're both like historic preservationists, and they did an outstanding job preserving Vincent Lugo Park, which is a children's playground nearby that has like sculptures from like a Mexican artist, and it's really significant in history, and it's like probably the best, most complete collection of this, artist's playground sculpture work, so they preserved that and kept them from being torn down. So these are people who are really smart, really active, and we met with them, and they seemed to approve our project. And I was really nervous because I wanted to make them happy. But, I felt like, it might be important to them. And it sounded like it was important to them to try to retain the front where possible. It was finding that balance because, ADAs, the cities requires us to meet certain ADA requirements. And yeah, we want to be able to accommodate people with ADA. So how do you do that with an old building that doesn't have that?
Sorry to interrupt. Just for anybody who doesn't know, what does ADA stand for?
American with Disabilities Act. And it's just like, laws, building codes that you have to comply with to make sure that a disabled person or, could enter the building and have like an equal experience with people who are not disabled.
I mean, that would be, I would imagine, one of the more, for any Masonic temple, if it's looking at being sold or repurposed or used for somewhere else, the vast majority of Masonic temples were built in the 20s with a second wave coming in the 40s and 50s. If I recall correctly, the Masonic temple, which is usually built in 1949, I think I had read. So obviously that was a time that, predated a lot of disability acts and codes. So I can see that being a challenge, but it sounds like there's a challenge that you're able to overcome while still maintaining the historical aspects of the building.
Yeah. So thankfully our architect, they came up with the solution. So the solution was, we didn't have enough space to have a ramp, so we couldn't do that. So we ended up having a lift in the front, but we concealed it behind a wall. And more or less the front, I think, looks really similar to kind of how it originally looked. Inside the building, we put in an elevator to get up to the second floor. There was no elevator before to the second floor. There was just stairs. We still have those stairs. We retained those stairs, but we added the elevator. And then they had a stage inside, an old stage, which we kept the wood on, and we just kind of like grinded it down and refinished it. But we needed to put a lift to go up to that one too. So we had to add 2 wheelchair lifts and 1 elevator. And then thankfully the rear entrance, since it's level with the ground, We didn't have to put anything there, so they could just walk straight in. But we did put like the handicap striping in the parking lot. We have a handicap parking spot back there, as well as on the street in the front. The city had put that in because that's on their property. And yeah, so yeah, kind of negotiating that. But the one that was kind of challenging was the one in the front, not wanting to change it and trying to find that balance. But of course, in the end, the city's not going to approve it without us doing something. But I think we came to a good solution.
I'm not sure if you can comment on this or if you have any thoughts or ideas, from your work creating the Blossom Market Hall. But one thing I was really struck by when I was in Los Angeles and kind of surrounding areas was, how concerned the city and the county seemed to be with, the preservation of historical buildings, even and especially Masonic temples and Masonic buildings. I mean, I did an interview, I'll leave the link up, with Jeff Greenberg. He is the owner of a recording studio that is housed in a former Masonic temple. Jimmy Kimmel Live, that show is recorded in a former Masonic temple, and Scottish Rite, and all of it, though, it's not just that they're using these buildings, they're maintaining the facades and a lot of the symbolism on the buildings. It seems that, because, I think one great shame we're seeing in a lot of places, Canada and the US, is when a historical building is sold or abandoned or whatever happens, it gets torn down, it gets modified to the point where it's not recognizable for what it once was. There are some exceptions, but Chicago's South Side Masonic Temple got demolished, and there's they're trying to save a few temples in Arkansas, I believe it was, or in the South, that are looking at getting demolished. So what is it that you think about Los Angeles, where they actually seemed, to their credit, to be concerned with the preservation of these historical buildings, and even if they're not used for the original purpose, are able to find new life, but also with that new life, there's still an effort to maintain a link to the history and the facade and the original character of the building?
Yeah, so I can't really speak about LA City because I feel like it's different in LA City, but I can speak to like the San Gabriel Valley, like the West San Gabriel Valley, the area that Lawson's at. When it comes to historic preservation, it's not something that's really on people's radar in this area, not yet anyway. I mean, I think maybe that'll start to change, and I hope that our building also sets a good precedent as well. The area that probably has it the most, I would say, is probably Pasadena or South Pasadena. You're more likely to find, historic preservation there and adaptive reuse. And I know Pasadena has their own rules and laws about, like, even the residential districts, how things should fit in. They have neighborhoods they protect, and San Marino is very strict about it. San Gabriel, I feel like maybe not as much, except they've always been kind of protective, and not so much the city itself per se, but I would say just people who live in the community. They've always been really protective about their beautiful Mission District because of the old mission that's there. And that's kind of why they even created that Mission District specific plan back in, I think they created this like maybe 10 years ago. But it's not something you commonly see. I almost feel like, I want to say carefully that our project is probably like the first real adaptive reuse project in all of San Gabriel. Most developers that come into San Gabriel, they want to tear stuff down because it is easier and cheaper to do that, and they'll want to tear stuff down. And that's kind of the developers the area has been attracting, historically. So when we came along, kind of our idea was kind of new to a lot of people. The idea of taking an old building and doing what we did to adaptive reuse, like some people didn't even know that that sort of thing could be done and done successfully, you know? So I know the historic preservationists, the two that we had spoken with, they were actually happy about it because they felt like it set a precedent for the entire neighborhood. That once this is here, it shows like this is how things need to be in this district, and this is how things can work, and to kind of help protect everything else that's there. So yeah, it's not really something that's on the radar, but I think and hope more people will find out about. And I do think cities probably will need to make that conscious effort to protect these buildings. And there's already kind of mechanisms for that in place, but it also requires the community to really do that. The community has to be the ones to protect these buildings and care about it.
And going to what has the last couple of months been like for Blossom Market Hall? Your grand opening was very recently. Just what's it been like? Because you mentioned, it's been three and a half year project to get this off the ground, and your reopen or your opening was December. So what's it been like for you, just seeing the culmination of all this work, and what's the community response been like, the vendor response? How's the opening gone over the last month, and I guess about a month?
It's gone really well. Like our grand opening was really busy. Our vendors started making money right away. They were all slammed pretty much. And they, to the point where some of them couldn't handle it and they had to close. And with the labor shortage going on, that's the challenge right now. There's like this national labor shortage that I'm sure everyone knows about. And it's definitely affected the food hall and, the vendors being able to operate, because we're open 6 days a week, and it's really hard for someone to be working 6 days a week and using the 7th day to have to prep, which just means they're working all the time. So some of them, we did have to let them close that extra day a week just because they couldn't find the help they needed. And these are really like most of our concepts are actually chef driven, and the chef is actually there, like cooking the food themselves, rolling the dough themselves, and so, that type of establishment, it's not like it's this corporate machine where you can just pay someone minimum wage and bring in whatever workers and train them on an assembly line to flip burgers, So, we understand, at least for this time now, like, we have to let them close that extra day. So that was kind of a challenge. And I know there were people who complained, customers had complained and said half the vendors are closed, when they come on a Monday or whatever. But we really kind of had to let these vendors rest, and recover. Thankfully, we have a couple of more chains. They're not like national chains like McDonald's or anything. They're more like small chains, local chains, a little more kind of new to the scene, and they were able to handle operating all days. In fact, they want to open more days if they could. So thankfully, they kind of help carry the food hall during this time. Inflation is hitting hard too. Our vendors have to charge high prices. Now we are in an area that has access to a market of affluent people. We're kind of an interesting area. Like if you go to the north, you have cities with high income like San Marino, Arcadia's not far, South Pass and Pasadena are like really close. But if you go south, you have an area where, you have people who are, lower income. And I love that we're in the middle of those two, because I really want to bring all kinds of people together, and so, with that, even with that, people with higher incomes, some of them coming in, and even with our food, because this kind of food, a lot of it is, it's food that should be, it's quality, it's not like fast food, where people get, I don't know, a whole meal for like $4 or $5, it's quality food. So it costs a little more, like oxtail stew from the Caribbean. It takes several hours to stew that, that's not going to be inexpensive food. So that's already going to make the prices high, but then you add inflation on top of it. and they have to charge higher prices. So I know there are customers that complained about that, but we kind of feel like, well, there's not much we can do right now with inflation hitting everyone, but it really is hitting everyone. I mean, I went to Jack in the Box, and one chicken sandwich, no fries, no drink, was already like $7. And that was like a few months ago. Maybe it's higher now, you know? And I never thought I would see the day that a chicken sandwich would cost that much from Jack in the Box. But like in terms of foot traffic, because of our fantastic location, because we have like vendors, some of them who I already know who the anchors are. They're drawing their own customers because people are so excited about their food, and they have already creating such a great reputation, or they brought a really great reputation with them from, you know, whatever they were doing, catering or at farmers markets. So you know, we still have some foot traffic. I mean, January has been a little slower with Omicron. I know that's kind of scared some people, so it's been a little slower, but I think it's a temporary thing. And we're very fortunate that, you know, we have people still wanting to come out, you know, still loving the food from our vendors. I don't know how things will change. I mean, it's evolving all the time. You know, from the time we opened until now, I mean, there's so many things that have already happened, you know? So I'm curious to see how things will play out over time for the rest of this year and for years to come. And I know our vendor lineup will evolve and change too. And maybe even our customer base will change, because I kind of feel like this whole area is changing in general, you know, the kind of the demographics of the people that are moving in, and, you know, just kind of people maybe, you know, kind of having different kind of lifestyles, maybe even, you know. One thing that was interesting to me was we always wanted to encourage like foot traffic to occur, like not just on evenings and weekends, right, which is usually the busiest for restaurants. We wanted to have foot traffic on the weekdays during the day, because that's important to keep business going for restaurants. So how do we bring that in? We're not in like a central business district. We're not in like downtown LA where, you know, but it's, I guess because people have been working from home, you know, that they've kind of been in this area a little more, but also we have like City Hall nearby. This actually did end up being an area where there's a lot of people working. There's a hospital nearby, but we also wanted to encourage people to come and work on their laptops. So prior to the pandemic, co-working spaces was like a big thing. So like the Wi-Fi lounge, like it's upstairs from the coffee shop. We have free Wi-Fi. We built in a way where it's people can bring their laptop and work and stay for a few hours. It's actually taken off. Like people really do come and bring their laptop, and they'll even have meetings there. They'll get a cup of coffee. So it's really nice to see that. And this is, keep in mind, San Gabriel is not known as, you know, an area for offices. It's really a suburban area, you know, that suburban area with like really great Chinese food and commercial districts on steroids, you know, with the Asian food. But yeah, and I'm glad to see that, you know, and encourage different ways people can interact in the physical space.
And then you've also brought in, you know, and I'll throw a link in the description to the website, but you've also brought in events and entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
What's that been like, you know, including community entertainment and events with the vendors, with the meeting space and workspace? Has there been good reception, good responses? And what are some events coming up at the market?
Yeah, so thankfully we had a lot of local entertainers email us interested to perform. And anyone who's like a professional performer, meaning like, you know, they actually have a business entity set up, like we will pay for the entertainment, you know. We don't believe in taking advantage of people. And this is how we can also get people to come in. So we have had like local performers come, and I was surprised. I was like, wow, like there's local talent in this area. Like we had Sarah Nolan come in, and she has a beautiful voice. She lives locally. She performs at like, she would perform at another restaurant not far from here. And she was excited to perform here because this is like her neighborhood. And it was wonderful. Like, people enjoy it. And we book it on a night that we think it'll go the farthest, like, meaning that's when the food hall's the busiest, just so more people can enjoy it. I mean, the other strategy would be, oh, let's try to book them on a slower night to get people to come. But right now we're just like, oh, let's just have the maximum amount of people enjoy it, you know? And we recently had Caribbean people perform, and that was a lot of fun. Like, people were kind of dancing. It made people feel happy. This weekend we have Angel Town Combo, which is like a jazz ska kind of band in LA coming. And it's great because also these performers bring their own followers too to come check out the food hall. And you know, there's just so much local talent in the area. We're really blessed with our location because we have access to all this talent locally and in LA because, you know, like I mentioned, downtown LA and LA City is like a stone's throw away. And we also just have so much culinary talent around us, you know, and they just don't have, you know, a platform to launch as their next step, you know, and not everyone can afford like a 1,000 square foot restaurant, you know, right away. So it's kind of like, that's one thing we always wanted to encourage with our project was giving, you know, chefs a place to launch a food business, and also just a place for creatives, you know, so having a place for these performers to come and people find out about their music and just enjoy it. And then also the local artists. We have a local artist exhibiting her work in the art gallery right now. So it's been great. I feel like I don't know if it's like driving foot traffic per se, but it's just something that we feel really good about offering visitors as part of the experience.
Have to mute myself. The experience, I mean, that's something. When you were starting, you know, 3.5 years ago, starting to plan this market, how much did your plans evolve? I mean, originally was the plan to, you know, be exclusively food vendors, because it seems like it is, based on what I've read and talking to you, like attending the Blossom market is a full. There's a lot of different experiences. Like, it's a full experience there. It's art gallery, workstations, food vending, events. How did all of those different ideas plan out? Was it always a plan to have kind of a multifaceted experience, or did the venue kind of also encourage you in terms of what you wanted and what you could do and the type of experiences you could create?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really like both. So, I mean, we came in with a very abstract idea. Okay, we want a food hall, you know, to showcase, you know, San Gabriel Valley, you know. So we always kind of wanted that unique SGV experience. Finding the building did kind of inform how we actually programmed it. So, like I mentioned, there's the upstairs area. We realized like we can't put any food vendors up there because they're just going to be forgotten about and ignored. You know, we need to have all the food vendors downstairs. And we're like, okay, what can we put up there? And we're like, should we put an office? But, you know, I don't know how the office market is here. It doesn't seem like it's very strong. Okay, what should we do? A co-working space? Oh, but we can't, you know, we don't have the resources to actually run a membership co-working space. So that's why we said, why not just, you know, do a Wi-Fi lounge and people can just use our Wi-Fi and come here and work for free. Also, you know, I do want to mention a big thing. Big thing in development is always parking, right? Parking really is the big thing that kind of constrains a lot of projects and makes them feasible or not feasible. So thankfully the city worked with us. We have a shared parking agreement with the city. We're next to that playhouse, like I mentioned. They have this huge lot with like 180 spaces in it. And there's another lot really close by that's like 120 spaces that's owned by the city. So they let us share the parking lot. We have our own, but it's only 16 spaces. So there's different calculations, but like, for restaurants, you have to provide a certain amount of parking spaces per square footage. For office and retail, it's like different requirements, but restaurant, like the requirements are higher. So if we had, let's say hypothetically, if we had made all 11,000 square feet food hall, we would have just blown out of our parking, like we just wouldn't have enough parking, to meet that. And I think it would just been so much that the city wouldn't allow us to do it. So they did advise us at the time, the planning director did advise us about, okay, what about this? And she wanted us to keep the stage that was already there. And we kind of already wanted to. So she kind of told us, what we wanted to hear. And so that one worked out. And then for the upstairs, we went with the Wi-Fi lounge and the meeting room being kind of more like a meeting space, kind of like an office space. And the requirements for that are a lot lower. So that's why it's kind of set up the way it is. But we're also happy it worked out, like, because right now during COVID, no one wants to have a meeting, but normally the meeting room is something that's going to be popular, I think, popular enough at least to make it worthwhile. Nonprofits can have their meetings there. And so everything kind of ended up working out where it sounded like it was very deliberate from the beginning that we planned it this way, but it was just kind of like figure out what we could do with all these constraints we have. And, we have customers that visit, and I know like right now seating is a challenge. Like there's just not enough seating when it gets busy on the weekends. And we are like we did order more tables and chairs, but there's still like a limit to where we could fit these tables and chairs. And I know people kind of wonder like, okay, there's not much seating in the food hall down here. And then they go upstairs and they see this open space in the meeting room with the art on the walls. And they're kind of like, this isn't a good use of space. They could put more tables up here. Like, why don't they do that? Well, the reason why we can't do that is because then it would be counted as restaurant space, which would make us not meet our parking requirement, so there's a lot of things behind that maybe not everyone understands, but that's kind of why it is the way it is. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's always a trick, right? There's always a lot of things behind the scenes in whatever it is, Freemasonry, there's always a lot of considerations that people aren't always aware of when they're looking at or they're looking at a venue and thinking about how, they would have done it. But, I think that's the thing that I appreciate about not just about yourself, but also about Village Studios and all the different people I've talked to who have, repurposed, reused Masonic temples and given them a second life and turned them into something great, right? Everybody likes to talk about in Freemasonry or outside of it, wouldn't it be great if X, wouldn't it be great if Y, but very few people actually follow through and do what they want to do and create something. And you've done that, and in doing so, you've given a second life to a historical building that, as you mentioned earlier, right? Who knows if you hadn't stepped in and purchased it, maybe it would have gone to a developer and it would have got torn down and replaced with something brand new. So I think it's wonderful they did that. Have any Masons, are you aware of any Masons who were visited, who used that building, returned to see the food hall? Do you know of any? Or
I don't know of any. We didn't really communicate with them directly. It was always through the agent. So I assume at least one of them has, maybe they're curious. But if they walk in through the front, they're going to see their logo still on the ground. So there's
That's awesome.
like really beautiful terrazzo flooring in the front part that has their logo, and with the G and the compass. I don't know is that a compass, but
yeah, square and compasses. Technically, it's called the compasses, but everybody just calls them compass.
Okay. So we kept that. We're like, we just got to keep this, and the terrazzo flooring is beautiful. So we try to keep as much of it in that area as we could. And a lot of like the original light fixtures, mid-century. We actually tried to retain the originals and refurbish them, but during demolition, there must have been a misunderstanding, but the demo company accidentally threw them out. But we had them, yeah, we had to have them remade, which actually worked out because now at least it's LED, it's up to modern, kind of energy efficiency requirements and everything. So we had them remade in that style because thankfully we had like pictures of it we could reference, and we had these beautiful globes that we had remade. So we brought them back, but kind of put them in different locations. There's these like arches that are kind of part of the interior architecture of the building that we retained, but we just like redid the wood on them because the old wood was just like really kind of falling apart. It just looked like we couldn't save it. The stage is still there, so they'll see that still there. I mean, we took away the blue velvet curtains. They'll see the stairs is still there. It's just painted now. Yeah, but then they'll also notice there was this big wall. So they actually had two halls in there that was separated by a big wall. So one of the halls was like their secret meeting hall. It had no windows. It just had doors to go in and out, but no windows because it looked like it was like a secret room. And they had all their seating in there. It was carpeted. It was upholstered. They had thrones and things like that. That was their secret meeting hall. And then the next hall that was next to it on the other side was like where they would rent it out for events. And that's the side with the stage. What we did was we took down the wall that was separating these halls. So it's just one big space now and one big hall. And then we brought in skylights because it was really dark in there. So we brought in skylights to bring in natural light. So that's probably what they're going to see that's really different. And also in the back, there was like an old kitchen, like a commercial kind of kitchen. It was like their old kitchen, I guess they would use for their events. They had stuff in there going back to like the 40s or something. So that area has been converted into an inset patio because we wanted some portion of it outdoor seating, but we couldn't use our parking lot. So we kind of put it in the footprint of the building. And we opened up the back with these accordion glass doors that open all the way. And so people can sit there and get a view of the San Gabriel Mountains to really get that sense of place. But yeah, that used to be the kitchen. So those are the changes that they would see if they were to come.
Well, if I ever get the chance to return to the Los Angeles area, this Freemason would love the chance to visit and check it out because it sounds and it looks very, very cool. For anybody who wants to, I'll leave some links down below, but where can people learn more about the market, get in touch? I've got a lot of Masonic buddies and friends in the Los Angeles area. If they want to check it out, where do they get the information?
Yeah, so they can go to our website. We actually are pretty good about updating it. So www.blossommarkethall.com. We have our events calendar on there where we put our live entertainment. We have all our vendor profiles. Our vendor hours are on there because they all kind of keep their own hours too. If they're on Instagram, that's the social media platform we use. So we always have updates on there. So those are the two places where they can get information about us.
Very cool. So yeah, links down below as well. Check it out. Any of my Masonic buddies in Los Angeles, I know some of you guys watch this, so check it out. It's not that far, San Gabriel. And yeah, I just want to say again, thank you for being on the podcast and for the work you did in helping to make sure that an important piece of Masonic history was preserved and found new life as a place for the community.
Thank you. It was our pleasure. And I mean, it's a fantastic building. The CMU blocks, you don't see CMU block buildings every day that they built themselves. And by the way, I didn't get a chance to ask, but where are you located?
Oh, Windsor, Ontario, Canada. So way up north.
Oh, you're in Canada. Wow.
Yeah,
Bases
yeah.
are spread far and wide.
We're everywhere. Not to get the conspiracy theorists up in arms, but yeah, we're most countries around the world, there's some Masonic lodges floating around in Masonic buildings. So I if I recall correctly, England has the greatest number of Freemasons, but America's up there. I mean, when the Masonic temple that you're using was built in 1949, there probably would have been, oh my gosh, 10% thereabouts of the population were Freemasons, adult men.
Oh.
Is I know it reached 10% in the 20s, and I think it stayed that way for a little while. So yeah, we're everywhere.